Hello, welcome to your lesson on decimal places. So decimal places is one of the rounding techniques in maths, and we do it so we're not working with great big long numbers when we do long calculations. The decimal places, if you think back to when you learnt your units, tens, hundreds, thousands and so on, after those you have a decimal place and then you have tenths, hundredths, thousandths and so on. So when we're dealing with decimal places, we're interested in these numbers here after that decimal. These numbers before the decimal will never change, so it's only the ones after, and the question will always tell you how many decimal places to work to. So if you're working to say 2 decimal places, you're going to be allowed to have the decimal and then 2 numbers after that decimal. If you're working to 3 decimal places, it's the decimal and then 3 numbers after the decimal, and so on. Now, we've got rules. If the number following the last number you're going to round to is a 5 or above, the number gets rounded up. If not, it stays as it is, which is easier for you if you watch the technique. Let's say I have a number 124.37624, and I want to round that number correct to 2 decimal places. So I'm allowed the decimal and I'm allowed 2 spaces, and then I've got to have a cut-off. Those numbers before the decimal stay the same, 124. The 3 stays the same, but now I look at that 7 and the number that is directly next to it on the right-hand side. Because the 7 is followed by a number bigger than a 5, that 7 gets rounded up to an 8. What would happen if that 7 was followed by a number smaller than a 5? Well, let's have a look. 124.37224. So it's exactly the same number, but I've changed the 6 to a 2 this time. And again, I'm going to round it to 2 decimal places. So after that decimal, I'm allowed 2 spaces, and then I've got a cut off, which means I'm interested in that 7 and the number that follows it, the 2. So my 124 stays the same, it's on the left-hand side of the decimal. The 3 is not affected. That 7 is followed by a 2, so it stays as it is, because the 2 is less than 5. Let's have a look at 1 decimal place then. So I'm going to have 43.6. 649, and I want to round that number to 1 decimal place. So this means my decimal, 1 number, and then I have a cut off. But I'm still interested in that number and the one that follows it. My 43 stays the same because it's before the decimal. My 6 is followed by a 4, and even though the end number is a 9, we ignore it. We're not interested in anything beyond that 4. So my 6 is followed by a 4, which means it stays as a 6. If, on the other hand, I had 43.689 and I wanted to round that to 1 decimal place, so I've got my decimal and I've got 1 place after it, then I cut off, but I'm interested in that number and the number next to it. 43 stays the same because it's before the decimal. My 6 is now followed by an 8, and the 8 is higher than a 5, so that 6 will get rounded up to a 7. One more set of examples. I'll do a 3 decimal place one. So let's say I have 4.50196, and I want to write that correct to 3 decimal places. So 3 decimal places. I've got my decimal, 3 numbers after, and then I have to cut off. But I'm interested in that number before the cut off and the number after the cut off. My 4 stays the same because it's before the decimal. 5 stays the same, 0 stays the same. Now my 1 is followed by a 9. That 9 is higher than a 5, so my 1 gets rounded up to a 2. And what would happen if I had 4.501126 and I wanted that correct to 3 decimal places? Well, again, my decimal, 3 numbers after that decimal, and then I cut off. I'm interested in the number before the cut off and the number after the cut off. 4 stays the same, 5, 0. My 1 is followed by a 1, which is less than a 5, so that stays as a 1. So 4.501. Okay, I will write 6 questions down for you to practice. Number 1, I'm going to say 203.4629, and I would like you to write that to 1 decimal place. Number 2, 3.9287. Again, we'll do 1 decimal place on that one. Question number 3, 1476.56294. 2 decimal places. Number 4, 31.9292. 2 decimal places. Number 5, let's have 7.53618. That one is to 3 decimal places. And our final one, number 6, will have 27.21379, and that's going to be to 3 decimal places as well. So pause the video while you do those, and then play the video again, and I will go through the answers. Welcome back. Let's have a look. I'm going to change the colour of my pen. Okay, question 1 then. We are going 1 decimal place, which means decimal, 1 number, cut off. We are interested in the number before and the number after that cut off. 203 stays the same. That 4 is followed by a 6, which is higher than a 5, so 4 gets rounded up to a 5. Next one, 1 decimal place. So we've got decimal, 1 place, and then a cut off. And we're interested in the number before and after the cut off. 3 stays the same. 9 is followed by a 2, which is less than a 5, so that 9 stays as it is. Next one, we're moving on to 2 decimal places. Decimal, 2 numbers after, and then we've got a cut off, and we're interested in that number before and after the cut off. All of those before the decimal stay the same. That 5 stays the same. 6 is followed by a 2, so it will stay as a 6. Next one. Again, we're working on 2 decimal places. So decimal, 2 numbers, cut off. Interested in the number before and the number after the cut off. 31 stays as it is. 9. That 2 is followed by a 9, so it gets rounded up to a 3. Next one. 3 decimal places, so decimal, 3 numbers, and then we cut off. We are interested in the number before and after the cut off. 7, 5, 3 are not affected. That 6 is followed by a 1, which is less than a 5, so it stays as a 6. And our final one, 3 decimal places, so decimal, 1, 2, 3 numbers, cut off. We're interested in the number before and after the cut off. 27.21, that 3 is followed by a 7, so it gets rounded up to a 4. So remember, it's always about the 2 numbers either side of your cut off. If that second number is 5 or higher, it will round your final number up. If it's lower than a 5, that number stays as it is. So well done on those, and I hope I'll see you in the